So, welcome back. Today is going to be, or rather this section is going to be a little bit of a step away from the learning of like pure Ruby. Sorry, I have my stream active, or rather the audio. So today's going to be a little bit of a step away from learning the kind of Ruby primitives and starting to work a little bit more with Ruby the way you will as a developer, making a sort of bigger Ruby app or Rails app. And part of that's going to be learning a little bit about gems. Some of it's going to be learning a bit more about the Ruby ecosystem, so the tooling around Ruby. And then a little bit around how to use a few gems. Most of them are contrived. One of them is actually incredibly useful, but it's trying to expose you to, well, how do I go about finding these gems and learning to use them. So let's get cracking. We're going to cover off gems first. So gems are basically a set of code that somebody else has written that you can use in your project. It's the simplest way of thinking about them. In other languages, they're called libraries or packages. But the long story short is it's code that somebody else has written that usually has some kind of purpose. So helping you read files or connect to servers or interface with their particular service is quite a common one. So service providers will often provide like a native gem that helps you use their service. There's all kinds of gems out there. There's whole categories. In fact, Rails itself is a gem, or a set of gems. So that's kind of what gems are. And there's a few ways to install them. The simplest is to actually just go to your command line and type gem install some particular gem. And what this does is it puts the gem into your system gems directory. Depending on whether you're using RVM or RBM for your system Ruby, this could be in all kinds of different places. But this is honestly not the recommended approach. There is something built entirely to handle this, and it's called bundler and gem files. And what that allows you to do is say, for my project, these are the gems that I require, and it installs them. Well, you ideally want to install them locally or only for your particular project, so you don't end up with all these overlapping gems and kind of problems associated with that. So let's learn a little bit how to use bundler. Now, when I said don't run gem install some particular thing, there is a caveat to that, which is gem install bundler is incredibly useful. So if you don't have bundler installed as a gem, I suggest you gem install bundler at your command line and get the bundler gem because you will need it. So we are installing bundler, and we have it now. So we can go bundler-v. And it's 1.16.0 as we can see here. So that's the version. Now, what bundler does is it reads a gem file. We're going to trash the current gem file that we have, the gem lock file we have, and start talking about it. So we create a gem file in the directory you're in, or wherever you want to have your project. And there is pretty much only one line you really need in it, which is source https //rubygems.org, and that basically says this bundler is sourcing gems from the canonical gem repository. So this is where most people put, like, this is where most of the Ruby gems are in the world. There are other places, but they are, I would say, few and far between, and this is primarily where you will find the lion's share of the gems. This line here actually says this gem, this project. So gem files are kind of go hand in hand with like being a project, and so they tend to be, when you have a gem file, it's kind of the gems for this particular project. So it goes kind of without saying that when you put the Ruby version that this gem file is associated with, then that's kind of, therefore that's the Ruby version that's associated with the project. There is other ways of doing this, but you know, that's kind of a common thing you will see. We don't need that right now, so I'm actually just going to get rid of it. But I would mention it because you may see it and go, well, what the hell is that? So the first one we're going to install is Awesome Print. And Awesome Print is an awesome way of printing output to your terminal. So let's install it. So what you do is, in your gem file, you just say gem and awesome _print. Save that, and then you come to your terminal where your gem file is. And from now on, you will always have a gem file and a gemfile.lock. But the first time you do this, you won't. So what you do is you type bundle install, or the shorthand for that is just bundle, which by default runs install, but we'll do it for demonstrative purposes. We'll do bundle install, press enter. And what this will do is it'll say, I will look through your gem file, find all of the gems that you're requesting, install them, and also create a dependency map. So in your directory, you'll have this gemfile.lock directory. And what you'll see is, unfortunately, somewhat contrived right now. There is a particular version of Awesome Print that it's requesting. And this is important because eventually you'll start running into, well, I need this version of this library and this version of this library. And some of those libraries will have dependencies on other libraries or other gems. And some of them will start conflicting or have shared library dependencies. And it's Bundler's job to help resolve those dependency issues and make sure that you are able to install the gems that you are requesting. You should ship this as part of your application because it is the manifest for what versions you were using when you developed it, and therefore what should work when you run it or somebody else runs it. So we now have the Awesome Print gem, but how the hell do we use it? And the first thing is we'll go and make an app.rb. There are several ways to do this. The easiest being we just say require. So this is using that require keyword again. Require Awesome Print. And what this has said is it's said to Ruby, use the load paths that you know about, of which one is the bundler's gem locations, and pull in that gem for me. So get me access to that gem. And then let's create something to Awesome Print. So we'll do something first like this. Let's create a hash. That was silly. Why am I typing that? A hash. And we will say my thing is cool. Foo is an array of 28, 29, 30. Maybe it's got my name in there. It could have an embedded hash, I guess, of monsters. Imp has health of 28 and damage of 10, and then we have a dragon which has health of 27 for some ridiculous reason, and damage of 3. So he's actually like a little baby dragon. And then we can put a hash out. So we'll run this application, ruby app.rb. Excuse me, I've missed something here. Where have I missed? Line 8. That's because, actually, let's just get rid of that for a minute. What do I miss now? It's a hash. Yes. Oh, silly me. Yes. Doing too many things at once. It's a hash. This value needed a key. Sorry, again, typing, coding, talking, very, very demanding. So we can see here we've output the hash, and it's, key, my thing is cool, foo is an array, name is JSON, here's a bunch of monsters. Kind of shitty and hard to read, so let's use awesome print. And this is where I want to start pushing you guys to read gem documentation. So we're going to read gem documentation real quick. It's not all that complicated. This is the awesome print gem GitHub repository. It's where the source code for it lives, and some of the documentation. It shows you how to install it, and that's the contrived way, obviously, without using the gem file. But basically it shows you, here's require awesome print, so how you pull it in, and then you just use AP and then something that you want to awesome print. So we'll do as it says. So AP hash, and we'll save it. And this may be unexpected. Okay, unfortunately it works because I already have awesome print as a system level gem. But if I did not have awesome print as a system level gem, this would not work. And the reason is, well, let's see if we can remove it. Gem, I think it's remove awesome print. Gem uninstall awesome print. I don't do this very often. I rarely uninstall gems. All versions. Okay, so we'll uninstall all the awesome print versions, and we'll make this. Remove this gem. Yeah, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Okay, so we'll run this again, and we'll watch, and it'll go. Okay, I can't load that file. I can't load that gem, and the reason for that is because it's not using the bundled gems as we have asked it to. So all this is saying is Ruby run this application.rb file, and Ruby goes, well, where's the gem? Looks in the system gem directories and can't find it. So what you actually should be doing when you are running a Ruby application which has a bundled gem file, you should always do this: bundle exec ruby app.rb. And what this says is execute this Ruby thing within the context of the bundled gems, or within the context of having those gems available to you, the gems as listed in the gem file. Gem. There are one or two exceptions to this, but heuristically, rule of thumb, do this. And you'll see now it will say, well, I need to bundle install, so we'll bundle install because we actually cleared that gem out, and we'll do it again. There we go. And see, now we can see like this really cool hash, and it's got like syntax highlighting, or not syntax highlighting, but highlighting, and it's kind of nice and cool and easy to read. Although that's a little odd. That's kind of funky indenting and not really all that useful, but you get the idea. It's kind of nice and a little bit neater. So that's using a gem, or a contrived usage of a gem. So let's use something a little bit more interesting. As you foray into programming, you'll very often start interfacing with other websites and other applications over HTTP. If you don't know much about HTTP, I highly recommend you probably go and learn about that. You'll have a little bit to learn, but basically it's the protocol on which most of the internet is based, and there's plenty of room for argument there, but the long story short is basically it's how most of the websites out there work. There are things that you do over HTTP, which I won't get too much further into, but primarily when you're visiting a website, you are performing a GET action on an HTTP connection. That's kind of what it's called. And when using other services, you're generally doing that on their API, it's called. It's Application Programming Interface, if I remember my acronym correctly, but it doesn't really matter what it stands for so much as it is the programmatic interface through which it expects other services to talk to it. It is mostly over HTTP. There is some other stuff out there, but it's rare that you will find that and rare that you will see it. So basically you talk to this application over HTTP, and I'm going to show you how to talk to an API over HTTP making a GET request. So I found this website that has an API that we can use, and it will return some values that we can start using. So what we need first is a gem that can talk HTTP for us. And in my opinion, the gold standard for that is called Faraday. You can use other ones out there if you so desire. This is my personal preference, and we're going to install it. So we add it to our gem file, we bundle install, so we get that. And you can see now we have this multi-part post gem installed, and in part of the gem file lock you can see it's starting to do dependency resolution for us. It's starting to get bigger and more complicated, and actually we've asked for 2 gems, but now we have 3 because of dependencies. So this is why bundle and gem lock files are important. It helps keep these things straight. So we've installed Faraday, we're going to require it, and then we're going to go read the documentation, because as we get further and further into this series, there is more and more things that I don't remember off the top of my head. I actually have documentation built into one of my workflows, so I can start doing things like looking for code samples, or rather documentation of various Ruby gems and things like that, because it's too much to remember. So we're going to read the documentation, but we're going to pull only like a small piece out. So it's, we already installed it, we know how to do that. Basic use is Faraday.get, so this is a class, and this is a class method. We've done this before, and then it's taking a string, which is, it should be obvious to you guys that that's a website. So we're going to copy this. We're going to drop it in, get rid of this garbage. Actually, let's keep that for the minute. Just comment it out. Drop it in. We'll grab the website that we wanted. Replace it. And run the code. Let's see what happens. Not a whole lot, because we're not printing it out. So let's print it out. But we're going to AP it out, because we have this cool gem. So we're using a gem to use another gem. And we're probably going to regret this. Yep, it's kind of huge. So what do we get? We get back this Faraday response. And this should look a little familiar to you guys. If it doesn't, let me refresh your memory. See this this thing here? Should look very familiar to you. So we're actually getting back an instance of a class called Faraday : response, or in fact, the class is called response, and it's namespaced by a Faraday thing. So it's got a bunch of attributes, as you can see, some env stuff. It's all a little bit confusing, and I'm not really sure what to do with it. So let's go and read the documentation, and it will say, well, you need to call the body method to get the body of the response back. So let's do that. AP response.body. Or an IRB. We'll just clear the screen and do it again. And there we go. Okay, so we're starting to see some values come back, some new line garbage. This is the body of that website. So in effectively 2 lines. We've reached out to somewhere on the internet, pulled some data down, and have it. Like, it's that simple. Like, Faraday is a fantastic gem for this. So if we want to have a look and see what it looks like on the website itself, we can go directly to it, and we can see here user ID 1 Sint. I can't speak Latin, so I won't bother trying to pronounce it, but we can see here, there it is, user ID 1, ID such and such and such. And what this is returning to us is a format called JSON, which is JavaScript Object Notation. It's a very, very common format to have an API respond in. It's quite human readable. You can make arguments that it's not, you'd be wrong. It's quite human readable. It's relatively unverbose, so it makes for generally small responses in terms of like data size. Right now we're not able to really format it correctly, and that's because what it's returning to us as is a string. So if we call class on it, see it's a string, which, well, this is the notation to say inherits from object. So that's not really useful to us. So let's do something called casting and see if it works. So we're saying, give me the response body, and this is where Ruby and other languages allow you to do interesting things. So you can actually say, take the response, call the body method on that, and then that response, call the toH method on that, and then that response, call the class method on that, although we don't need that. So let's call the toH method, and toH takes a string. So let's do that first. Let's do that. We'll as a demonstration. So we will take my hashed string, and we will say foo bar, and this is a hash within a string. So we can print this out, and it'll come out similar to how the last one came out. Kind of ugly and shitty and not very great. So let's do toH on that, and we should see that it converts it nicely. No, it doesn't. Okay, so we need to include another gem to make that work for us. So let's do this instead. Let's go, okay, and this is how programming works. You go, okay, I've got this thing, it doesn't work, what do I do? Well, I want to get a string, and my end goal is to parse the JSON. I want the JSON in a format that I can work with, a native Ruby format. So in this case, a hash. And this is kind of how things work. I just happen to know that there's a gem called JSON. So we can install that. And we can require it. And then we can use it. And let's have a look and see if we can find the documentation for it. This is, I believe, the right one. And it shows you how to require it, and then it shows you how to use it. So we can parse a JSON document into a Ruby data structure by calling json.parse. So json.parse my hashed string, and then we're going to also print that out. Foobar, right? So it's kind of made it look nice to us. So we go back to the website, have a squiz. This is kind of what the JSON response of the website should look like, and let's see if we can get a sort of similar thing going on. So we'll kill that code, uncomment this, json.parse. On the response body, we don't need to cast it to hash because that didn't work. I recall now, I think that's a Rails particular thing that Rails allows you to do. So we're going to be taking the response from this website, calling the body on it, parsing that JSON response, which basically turns it into a hash for us, and then also printing it out. And we should get something that kind of looks roughly like that. And we do. How cool is that? I mean, while this may not be useful for like a website, this is kind of useful for debugging purposes and trying to understand what information you're working with. Like, it makes it super easy and nice to read. So what we're going to do is leave that as it is, and we'll talk a little bit about two more things: binding of caller and pry. And these are gems for when things aren't quite going right for you for whatever reason, and you need to kind of get inside your code. So this will become more of a problem. The more complicated, and the more you're doing that's complicated and is outside of your comfort area, you'll start hitting issues where you don't know exactly what you're doing and what you're working with, and you kind of need to get into the nitty-gritty of the code. And so what this allows you to do is stop execution of an application at a particular point and start messing around with it as the application is executing, or rather within the context of the application executing. So let's kind of revert this a little bit back. So here's my body, and we'll go and pretend that we don't know anything about that, and we want to call that toHash method, which we know doesn't work, right? So this will blow up and go boom. Don't know how to do that. Go away. Undefined method toH for string. Now let's say that for some reason we didn't know what the hell we were doing with that. Take a drink. We didn't know what to do with that, and we want to kind of get in there and sort of like mess around, like about here. We want to start messing around to find out why it doesn't work. So what we can do is this. We'll add these two gems, binding of caller and pry. And what these gems do when we install them is it allows us to do this. Require pry. Excuse me. Require pry. And about here, type binding.pry. And then we'll run the code and see what happens. And as you can see, we're kind of presented with this IRB style terminal. And it functions nearly the same as IRB, except everything up until now that has already been executed within the application is as if it had been executed inside of IRB. So we can do cool things like this. We know response has been set, so we can say, well, what's response look like? It's that gobbledygook that we've already seen. We can mess around with that if we want. AP response. And what else we got? We got, here's my body. So, okay, that's the body we've got. And then let's say you're like, oh, why the hell wasn't that working? Maybe we need to see what methods it's got. You can say, okay, well, here's my body. Methods, what methods have you got? And you can see what methods you can call on it. And you can look and you can say, oh, okay, I don't really see toHash. And that will give you the kind of hints that you need and the help that you need to start trying to debug your application and get to the point where you can actually get it running again. Now, I don't necessarily recommend this as the perfect way to do things, but it is at least a fantastically useful tool for some circumstances. There are plenty of other ways to debug things. The one I would highly recommend, which we won't go into just yet, is don't make mistakes in the first place and write tests. But it doesn't always work like that. The other one that's very useful is the one that everyone learns kind of first, which is puts debugging. So you print out stuff as your application runs, which gives you information that helps you kind of debug it without going into this inner terminal, without going into this debugger as it is. So we can go ahead and do what we know will work and see what happens. Prints out perfectly. We can AP it out. Okay. And now when we exit, the application will continue as though we had not written any code. So it's important to note that any code you write in here does not actually affect the code that continues to execute. So again, it blows up and says, I don't know about that 2H method. Anyway, that's kind of the sum of the working with gems at a really, really low resolution. I don't want to... Do you know induction? Do I know induction? As in... Sorry, I'm reading my chat finally. As in mathematical proofs. Anyway, so this kind of gives you the like quickly how you work with gems and gem files. So I don't want to go too much further with that because finding the gems that you want and working with it. Yes, I know mathematical induction. I had to do it at university, unfortunately, a long time ago. Okay. Why do you ask about mathematical induction? Why isn't this true? Honestly, not really my core competency, so you'll probably have to figure that one out for yourself. Anyway, that's about where I'll leave it. There are plenty of other gems out there. RubyGems.org has fantastic categories and things that you can read through and try and figure out what gems might be useful to you. A lot of us keep lists of useful gems that we will continue to use day to day on different projects and things like that. From here, I think the best thing to do is start trying to find gems that you might think are useful, or mess around with working with APIs, doing awesome printing and things like that, trying to pull things out of that hash that are kind of interesting to you. So maybe you can go and pull particular pieces of information out of that response body to try and start understanding how you work with hashes, and go and read the Faraday documentation. I'll leave it there, and I'll see you for the next episode.